And the label, honestly, this is a true story. When we took it to them, they went, "What's this?" And we said, "It's Kick. It's our album." They're like, "Well, we don't understand it." Okay, because this is 1987. Can't you guys just do like a hairband thing and just put on some spandex and play the game? We're like, "No, this is our album and we really love it."
Hello and welcome to episode 62 of Vintage Rock Pod, the ultimate classic rock podcast that proudly claims that my music is better than yours. I'm Paul Stevenson. Thanks as always for hitting play. Now, my guest today is one that I was so happy to get on the show. I'm just putting it out there that I am a huge INXS fan. They are one of those bands that, for me, they always put a smile on my face. Their songs are infectious and they make you move. Yes, Michael Hutchence was an incredible frontman, full of energy and vigour. He was ridiculously good-looking, even as a bloke I can say that. He demanded the spotlight. But just behind the spotlight was the man that, without him, there really wouldn't have been an INXS that we know. Now, yes, Michael was the face, the personality, but the sounds, the groove, the feel, the heartbeat of the band came from my guest today. Andrew Farriss was the principal songwriter in the band. He primarily came up with the music. Michael added the flair with the lyrics. Now, Andrew is a multi-instrumentalist, effortlessly switching between instruments on stage. He's an incredible producer as well, having worked with some fantastic artists over the years. He has an ear for not just making great music, but boundary-pushing music too. Now, to remind us, INXS, as a band, sold more than 50 million records around the world. They had number one albums and singles across the globe too. They won the biggest of awards and played the biggest of venues, all whilst keeping the band lineup the same throughout their 20 years with Michael Hutchence. The six amigos of Michael out front, Gary on bass, Kirk on guitar, and then the three brothers, John, Tim, and my guest, Andrew Farriss. Now, I'm excited for you to hear my chat with Andrew, but first, just a quick thank you for the response to the new daily podcast that I've started putting out this week. This Day Rocks. I'm sure you'll have seen it pop up in your feed. It's a really short 5-minute daily episode with a different guest each day. Early download figures looking really good, so I really do hope that you're enjoying it. And some nice feedback from Nathan Schneider, Joey Michaud, Mac B, and Tenacity PR as well. It's all been positive, so thank you very much. And just to let you know that I've got some great guests coming up over the next few weeks as well, including a couple more Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. Honestly, it's been a busy time here in the Vintage Rock Pod studio. But back to today's guest then. I've spoken with people all over the world. Dave Mason was over in Hawaii. Joe Lynn Turner was in Eastern Europe. Lee Aaron was in Canada. Thijs van Leer was in the Netherlands. But this was my first call down under to Australia. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that I live in the Highlands of Scotland. Andrew lives in a similarly fairly idyllic rural area of Australia. So if you hear little bits of internet drop out, you know why. I've done my best to repair what I can, but don't let that distract from this fantastic chat. Now, we talk about his new music and then dive into the success of INXS, where Andrew talks all about his friendship and writing role with Michael, the pressure to follow up their first real hit in America, all the stories around the incredible album Kick, which the label didn't understand when they first heard it, all the way through to working with the legend that is Ray Charles. It's a great interview, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Andrew Farriss from INXS. Now, I'm delighted to welcome to the show a magical musician, singer, and songwriter whose songs have gone to number one all over the world, whose albums have been certified as platinum so many times, he's probably got enough shiny discs to cover all the walls of my house. He's won awards all over the globe as well, from the ARIAs in Australia, Brit Awards here in the UK, MTV Video Music Awards too. And he's back doing things his own way in a country setting too. I'm delighted to welcome to Vintage Rock Pod principal songwriter with the awesome band INXS, Mr. Andrew Farriss.
Hello, Paul. How are you, mate?
I am good indeed. Thank you so much for joining me all the way down under there in Australia. Whereabouts in Australia are you?
I live out in the middle of nowhere. I've owned a block of dirt out here for 30 years, and it's been a really good thing for me in my life. I'm very fortunate to live out here, and I work outdoors as well. I get my hands dirty and, in a good way. I work physically, and that's good for me. It saves money for going to the gym.
Yes, absolutely. And keeps the mental health strong as well, doesn't it? Being outdoors and things like that. So great stuff indeed. Now, Your success has been incredible. I mean, 50 million records sold around the world, plus with INXS, and we'll talk about that shortly. But I'm keen to hear about this musical direction that you're on at the moment. Now, last year saw the release of your first solo album. Now, we know that INXS are all full of different styles, and you've never been one to kind of be pigeonholed into one sort of style of music. But this solo work is a country theme, isn't it? So is that a genre that you've always enjoyed, or is it something that you've got into in later years?
A bit of both, where, my main role within INXS was to write songs. And, I was always at the back of the stage, and that's okay. There's 6 members in INXS, and that's a lot of real estate when you're on the stage. And but I always saw my role as really, as a musical kind of like, I always thought of myself as writing a soundtrack for the band, because you walk out on a stage and you need to play music, and you need, and that's where Michael and I met when we were friends, school friends. I'll come back to that in a minute. But with what I'm doing now, to answer your question, I live out in a place like behind me that you're looking at. I live out in a world where people do work outdoors and they do wear cowboy hats, and it's all very real. And it occurred to me from my INXS background, where it's very disconnected from this kind of lifestyle idea that I live with all these people, it'd be really interesting for me to explore country music and how their lives are that are affected, by the environment, weather, stuff like that. But I've also always loved country music because I like the songwriting in it. Songwriting, to me is where it all begins. And so I didn't start out one day going, I am going to make a country music record. It didn't really happen quite like that. Actually, the truth is more weirder than that, where I've made recordings, demos over decades now. And I took some of my demos with me to re-record them in Nashville because the session musicians that are playing there are some of, in my opinion, the best in the world. And they're really good if you give them the right guidance, of what you're trying to do. And I thought, this is just great. So I take my demos there. I said to them, look, when I finish tracking my music, I'll find a singer that really knows what he or she's doing. And one of them said, what's wrong with your voice? And I said, well, it's me, and they said, well, why don't you sing it? Right? And I went, okay, well, sure. I thought, I hope it sounds right. But when it came to me being a lead singer and like the guy, it was kind of testing for me because I had to keep remembering that this is not about necessarily now I'm recording me singing. I got to remember where I sound good and how I don't sound good with my own songs. And it got kind of tricky there for a while. But the more I'm doing it, the more I'm getting more and more kind of used to myself. I know I say to myself, that sounds crap. That sounds pretty good. That sounds great. As I'm going along, I'm getting a better idea. It's part of my journey. I feel like I'm meant to do this. And it sounds kind of weird. And
you talk about getting to know yourself as a front man, basically. You've done a few shows, haven't you, recently? How have they gone down? How have you found doing that and being the man at the front singing?
Yeah, it was all very well till they started throwing vegetables at me, Paul. It's going pretty well. No, it's been going well, Seriously, it's been good. And I just got to remember, after all these years of being on stage with such an amazing group like INXS, I got to remember I'm the front man. I have to entertain people and I have to sing, So as I'm playing guitar, usually, on stage these days, I don't play much keyboards. Maybe later I'll add keyboards again. But I'm playing a lot of guitar, and which I always played with INXS, well, mainly wrote with the guitar actually. But it's more as I'm playing now, I'm concentrating a little less on my playing, a little bit more on my singing and entertaining people, and so, hey there, and that's a new thing for me, even after all these years. And also everything that I've been doing with my country rock folk music is really what I'm doing. There's influences of other things, this, a little bit of blues, a bit of whatever, and I'm bringing it all into play. I wish I could tell you I knew exactly what I'm doing, but I sort of don't really. I'm making it up as I go along.
That sounds great. Now that the record is available to listen to and stream and everything all over the place, isn't it? Just like the usual places, Spotify and all that sort of stuff. And is there a place you can actually buy a physical copy so we can hold it ourselves as well?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a vinyl as well, which I put a lot of effort into, as, did Marlena and an art director we work with. The vinyl actually, it does things. I can't explain it. I wish I could hold it up. And I didn't know you asked me about it. But it's got a picture, like it's got animation on it. So when it goes around the turntable, it actually does things, and you can get like a little app and you put it on. And there's things moving on it, like birds and horses and clocks and things that are going around both sides of the vinyl. But it was sort of funny when I went to do the vinyl, the record label and other people were like, you don't want to do vinyl, do you? I mean, it's just so old-fashioned. I'm like, I don't agree. Actually, having spent time in the US recently, you go to a huge bookstore chain called Books & Co., where I went there 10 years ago. They had a small little section with vinyl. Now it's almost half the building is full of vinyl. I'm going like,
yes.
Hello, and I think it's
the same
because
here in the UK as well. Our big store, HMV, is full of vinyl, and vinyl is the rage, and that's what everyone wants these days.
Well, because it's physical, it's got artwork, and you can read lyrics, and you can look at it, and you say, who's this artist? What are they all on about, And that's what it's really all about. I don't think it's necessarily a fashion thing. I think it's got more to, and I think it probably horrifies some of the corporate people because they like having you in a little box made of titanium they can push buttons with,
And you talk about being in a little box. That was something you certainly couldn't put INXS into. Now, for a bit of fun, I put a post up on social media last night and just asked my followers, my listeners, to describe the sound of INXS. Could they do it? And I had people saying, like Dave Alcock said it was pop rock. I had Athel Manson saying you couldn't pigeonhole it. It was genre defying. And then other people saying, Joey Michaud said new wave. It was other people saying funk rock as well. So it was something that you really couldn't pigeonhole. And I saw an old interview of yourself and Michael where you were discussing your influences at the end of the 70s. And Michael said that from one end it was Chic and the other end was Sex Pistols. And you remarked it was a Chic Sex Pistol. And that kind of goes to show that you guys were never scared to push the boundary when it came to making music and not being pigeonholed and trying to do different sounds and things on records.
Yeah, look, I'll take all of that and wear that with pride. Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Paul. I mean, I think, God bless him. I think Michael was also, he flew pretty high as an artist. And what I mean by that, Michael was always excited by, the unknown and flying higher, as a human and as an artist. He, as a singer and everything, he just got better and better and better as he went along. And I think, he was a complicated person too, but he was always impatient. And one of the things he never really learned to do properly was to play an instrument, which is what, his voice and his mind were his instruments, really, his charisma, great lyricist as well, very, very poignant, very direct with his lyrics, brilliant. But I would write lyrics too, but it was mainly my music skills and whatever that he suddenly realized he could resource a lot of what I brought to the table. And really, we're completely diametrically opposed as people. I'm a bit slower. I don't mind being on the earth. I don't want to fly up in the ether. That doesn't really interest me. I'm more of a ground guy. And so we were that opposite characters and personalities worked really well for INXS because we were never competitive. You see so many bands where the people within the band sadly have lots of issues with each other. It's because often they get very competitive, and even right towards the end of his life when Michael and I were talking about, his own world and what he wanted to achieve, what we wanted to do as a band. We laughed, he laughed, we laughed, saying one of the good things about us is we were very different people. We didn't really want the same things all the time. And I think that was important because when we got together, whether it was socially or to work within the band, we really came together on a more professional level. And I'm grateful for those memories,
Indeed. And you mentioned earlier, there's obviously 6 of you in the band, your brothers as well as Michael and things like that. But the fact that for that was it 2 decades that you were together as a band, it was the same members all the way through. And you mentioned there about the feeling within the group. And that's kind of rare thing, isn't it? I mean, even successful bands, they change members in and out and different instrumentalists. You have different singers at times as well. But for you guys to have had such success with the same lineup for such a long time was incredible.
I agree. I mean, I've often thought about that. In fact, I said it I said it to my daughter Josie today, that exact same thing, that to be in a band is a very unnatural state in the first place. I mean, because she was talking about her daytime job and how she just is so glad she can go home from work and not be with all those people. And I said, well, your funny old dad here, you know, we used to roll around for months on end working together and traveling together. And we were like a little unit, you know, kind of like almost like a military unit, where you've got to be very careful what you say and how you respect other people. You know, it's very important, because you can say the wrong thing, and it's not just about, you know, being mates or your brothers. You're in a business with all these people, you know, and there's art involved, and you got to be cool, you know. So I think, you know, those experiences for me with those guys in INXS, I respect them hugely, and I know what they went through because I went through it with them.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Now, you had great success in Australia, obviously, right from the start. Your first 3 albums were getting bigger and bigger. And then the 4th album came along, The Swing. It went to #1 over there. But it was your 5th album, wasn't it? Listen Like Thieves, that really hit home around the world for you.
Yeah, that's correct. And it was the first album that INXS had worked with Chris Thomas, British record producer. Anyone that might know that name would know that, you know, some of the recordings he worked on and worked with people were simply astounding. The first job he ever had was working with the Beatles when he was 19, because they were arguing, and George Martin went into the dean of I think London College of Music or something, and said, "Can I borrow your brightest student?" And the dean said, "Sure." So George Martin said, "Would you like to come down to Abbey Road and do some work?" And he's like, "Okay." He gets in the black cab, goes down there, and he walks them straight in to the Beatles sessions on the White Album, and says, "Look, you know, you're not getting on very well, you guys. I'm going to go to Greece with my wife for 2 weeks, and this guy here is going to record everything you're doing. His name's Chris Thomas." And walked off and went to Greece. And if you read the liner notes, yeah, Chris has played a lot on the White Album as well. But he went on to do not just that. He went on to do, like, you know, Roxy Music. You know, I think he helped mix Dark Side of the Moon with Alan Parsons, and he went on to, you know, to produce Nevermind the Bollocks for the Sex Pistols, and it goes on and on and on and on. His career was massive. Well, that album of ours that we did back there in 85, I think it was, 1985, Chris, he said, "You've got a good album. I like this album. There's some great songs on it, but you just don't have that one song." And there's this sort of sinking feeling in your guts, and you go, "What?" You know, he goes, "Yeah, you just." I'm like, okay, because I always felt that responsibility, you know, right from the get-go, you know, as a songwriter, to always give us what I felt the band needed. And so did Michael, you know, as well. And then we're all sort of, I was pretty despondent at that point. And he turns around to me and Michael, he says, you go in that room and you come up with that song. We're all going now. I don't know where they all went, to a restaurant or pub or something. And I'm like, great, you know, and then it was my elder brother, Tim, and said, "Look, Andrew had been working on this thing, like this groove and this riff and this big chord thing that comes in on the chorus." And he said, "Why don't they work on that?" And I thought, actually, it's not a bad idea, because it didn't have a name then. So Michael and I just played it over and over and over again, which is the demo for What You Need. And then it became that, and we just made it like an upbeat, feel-good song, and it went huge, and it went top 5 for the first time in the United States. And what I didn't realize we were doing at the time, I mean, we kind of thought we knew what we were doing, was melting that funk groove in with rock, so that, you know, and fortunately for us, we got right on the beginning of a train of people, you know, that came along with or after us, that went, "Oh, that sounds really good," because it's got the power of rock, but you can still dance to it, you know.
Fantastic. And as you said there, it went top 5 in the US, and that was huge and made you superstars. But then, was there any pressure to then come up with the album which then followed that?
Yeah, sure was. And so, like, you know, I remember our manager, Chris Murphy, who sadly passed away about a year ago, he called me at home. Back then I was living in Sydney. Obviously, you can see behind me, I don't live in Sydney anymore. But he calls me and he says, did you know that your songs, gone top 5 in the United States? And I said, I had no idea. And he said, that's amazing. You should go out, have a drink.